Now you got your cover slipped off. I just put a rag over it. As I replaced this cylinder head, it told me to make 2 revolutions of the engine. When I did, something wasn't on there good and it flew off. And if it hadn't been me putting something over it, then it sure would have flew off this time too if something was in there. So how do you know this engine's in time? There's plenty of videos on how this engine's in time. Now, even though I set that on top dead zero on that crank pulley, when I pulled this apart, the mark was on the bottom, which told me it was 180 out. So all you got to do is at the top of this is another part I'm going to be replacing. The cam phaser, the VVTI, goes on the intake. So the way you can tell is on this spot right here. As you can see, I painted it prior to. When you look right back here on this cover, you can see that dot. That's how you know that one's right. Well, this one doesn't. The exhaust one doesn't go straight up. It goes to the left. See the dot on the cog there? You see the mark back here in the back? Those ought to be lined up. Now, it might be off just a fuzz right now, but it's on there from what it should be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all this stuff right here off. Now, when I went to go get the cover off, the timing chain cover, all I done was took this pry bar with this cover still on here and everything 100% removed. I know it was removed and just pulled it a little bit like this. And then I put me something down in here in the corner because it come loose here. So it's real easy and go down through there. The biggest thing I've noticed about these that come off, when they go to come off that hangs up, is on this right here because there's just studs sticking on this cover, so they get hung on the inside of this right here. So that might, if it's stuck, that's a good place for you to check, is this water coolant pass through here. Check that. After you do that, just little by little, and as you do pull it off, like I said, there's O-rings. So here's one. One's on the bottom, which I got covered up. As you can see, that rag is just down here just to keep anything, because I'm going to peel all this old RTV off, and I don't want it falling in the oil pan, though I am going to change the oil after I do this. After you do that, I covered that up. So the next thing you want to look at is there's also an oil ring that goes here. This one actually managed to stay on the engine, so I'm going to just leave it on there. When you look at the cover on the back side, you can see all of them. This is the back side, this is the bottom. There's an O-ring on the bottom of that, see it? There's one here, one there, which stayed on the engine, and then that one. This piece right here, where the oil passage goes, this comes when I changed the oil passage return from a plastic one to a metal one. This comes with, I bought it with the passage thing. If you do that, it'll come off just slowly and surely. Don't pry it. If you pry it and something's stuck, don't wedge screwdrivers between here and ruin this mating surface. Just ease it a little bit and it'll come right off. Now we're going to get back in here to set this time. I'm going to take all this stuff loose. So LC Engineering makes a kit. So the engine, the difference between a 2.4 and a 2.7 is I believe it was an early 2.7. I can't remember any which way. The difference between when they changed the engine is they put a balance shaft in here. And the reason why is because they added a longer boring stroke to the 2.7. So when they add the longer boring stroke, it made the cam unbalanced, or the crank unbalanced. So my assumption, instead of fixing it, instead they made the block and they put 2 balance shafts in. There's one here and there's one here. Go back in here and these are on their own little timing thing. The LC Engineer makes a kit that you get rid of every one of these right here and this other chain here, and you take all that stuff off, and once you take it off, it's not in there anymore. Though the engine, I would say, would vibrate a little more. I don't know how much more it really vibrate, but it'll vibrate a little more and you can take them out. Now, I'm going to take all that out because I know that my timing's off to an extent because it hard starts and have to give it gas or let off the gas or whatever, and it won't hardly start. Well, I know that soon my issue has, these right here have nothing to do with the time of the engine. It will, if it's out, it'll be vibrate, but these right here have nothing to do with the engine running per se correctly. It just will vibrate like pieces. So the way to take this off, in this book states, I'm going to pull this all the way back here. Right here on this piece right here, this will slide down. When it slides down, this piece right here, this is the tensioner. Slide down. When you slide down, you stick you a, in the book it says use a drill bit, which works really well. So when you go to push on that a little bit, that thing right there will go like that, and it'll slide down and slide open, and you stick something in there, and it'll keep it from coming back in the position it's in now. And it'll hold it open so that way you can move that plunger in and out. Now, I don't believe you have to take that completely off in order to get this chain off, but I'll let you know as I do this. It's been a minute since I've done it. Now, as far as to get this off, there's a bolt right here that has to come off on this side. Once you do that, this side right here, I believe that's only one. Yeah, the one at the bottom's only one, and then this one right here holds itself. On this side, you take this bolt loose, this nut off here. Once you do that, that side will come off, and that'll give you slack. But there's plenty of videos on how to do this. There's a Spanish-speaking guy. You can tell Spanish is first language, and he shows you how to put all this in there. So reference is, I'm not sure his name, but I'll find it and try to link it below in the description, so that way you can look it up and he runs you through how to do this. So as y'all can see, I got everything slapped back together. Everything's in there where it's supposed to be. I let it set overnight just so, well, it got dark, so I just let it set overnight. No big deal. Got everything in there that's supposed to be in there. From the looks of everything, there's no apparent leaks of some sort. There is some down here, and that was from previously. So everything just went back together in reverse. Now what we're going to do is, in the process of taking the crank pulley bolt off, which I still got to tighten up, I use the starter bump method. Well, it worked. I got it loose. But it took out the radiator too. So, thank God I got online, advanced search the stores. Parts place searched the stores and found me one at the Car Quest, and went down there and got me one. So, been installing a new radiator today, boys. And so, more of that when we get it on there. For the 4-cylinder, this is the part number for the radiator. We'll install that. I'll show you how to take the radiator loose. On the 4-cylinder ones, and I don't know if the V6s are the same. Bolt here, 12mm. Bolt here, see right there, 12mm. And you look down in the bottom down here. Look right back in here. See. Let me see here if I can zoom in for you. There's a bolt back in there too. Get that light. So you look back in there, and you won't have this issue if you don't have a light bar mounted in the same spot as me. Look back in there. See that bolt right there? That one out. And on the other side is the bolt on the bottom the same way. If you're unsure where the bolts are, this is the condenser for the AC, which I replaced because I'm a firm believer when you place the AC, place condenser and expansion valve and all that stuff. If you're unsure where it goes, all you gotta do is follow down the bottom of this thing right here. If there's a bolt holding it on right here at the bottom, and see where that bolt comes out at. Same thing on the other side. Do that and take it loose. So we'll take that loose right now. Now the connector's already got this one off. Right back there where you can see that inlet port at. This one right here is where your thermostat and things are at. If you ever have to change it, it's right behind your connector for your power steering pump. Right there. That hose loose. That hose runs to the bottom of the radiator. The other side runs right off the side of the cylinder head. Pretty accessible, which is good. It's all around here. Do that, take that loose, and we'll pull it out. So with the new radiator open, these are made for automatic transmission lines that run through this to cool it down. There's a cooler for them too. Well, since my application is a standard shift, you don't need those. One thing that I checked online in thread forums as well as checked myself is put air pressure in those and made sure those didn't come out any other ports, which they shouldn't, but just as a precaution, make sure that it doesn't have any leaks in it. With the new radiator, so the old one had nuts that holds the fan shroud on. Well, the new one comes with clips. Slide them in from outside to inside. They only slide in one way because of the way the plastic's molded. Then you reuse the same bolts that you had before. As you remember, the fan shroud on the driver's side was higher, and then it's underneath the water inlet on the other side. Slide both those bolts in there. Now I'm leaving these caps on here, so we're about them being contaminated. The event you buy a radiator and those are on there, you don't need them. I mean, you could probably wire something in to cool off that, depending on your application. Well, a number of different things. You can run your transmission lines. Could probably run power steering lines through it, which you should have a power steering cooler. But, you know, depending on the application, any which way, here's a spare cooler if you need one. After I got that in there, the only thing I have to do now is secure the hose fittings on it, but I'm going to mount it in the truck, then put the hoses on it. So the way it goes in the truck is reversal of removal, so we're going to set it in there. One thing I noticed right then before install is these clips are made on the factory one I have on the top. The reason why is because they're made so when you set your radiator in here, they'll hold on these bolts here, so as soon as the back out, the radiator would lean back and not fall all the way out. So what you got to do is switch them from the bottom to the top. I don't know if the automatics maybe have the groove on the bottom, but they're both on the bottom, so they're pretty easy. Just wiggle them around a little bit and they'll pop right out of there. Pop the top ones out up here and then switch them around. So that way they'll fit in this application. So how to get them out. The rubber that's on the top there, how to get these out, the rubber on the top here. All you gotta do is reach underneath there. You got the metal piece and rubber piece and you just pull it out. And this is on the outside of the radiator. So this is the part that'll be facing the wind. Pull that out and it'll pull right out. Get up here to the other one. Do it the same exact way. Wiggle it back and forth like that. Pop right out. You know, switch these out. Make sure they're tight. Pushed in there together. Because right there is for vibration. You want to make sure you pop them out. Put these in here. Like that. As you can see here, these pieces we switched out, those are the little grooves. See how they sit on here like this? So that way you can set this thing in here and get your bolts in. It'll hold itself for you until you start the bolts in it. And that's the reason why we switched them. On the automatic, I don't know, they could be different, it could be on the bottom. But on the standard shift, in this 09 model, it's on the top. Now onto the coolant of the radiator. Now the radiator coolant that I buy, I don't feel like the need to pay for watered down fluid because I might want to make it a little stronger. 50-50, you know, considering your climate and your area, you might want it a little stronger. You know, if you live in North Dakota, you probably want way more antifreeze in it than what somebody in Florida is going to put in their stuff. So I always buy the stuff that says add water, and I just buy the one that's for all makes and models. So that way I know it's going to work. Now you can buy the good brand stuff. That's entirely up to you. Thing to be mindful of is this stuff is toxic to the environment and the animals because of the ethylene glycol that's located inside it. As you can see here, ethylene glycol. So what I do is I take this, I understand it's 50-50 water, needs to go in mine. So what I'll do is I'll pour this down to where right now it's got about 4 liters in it. So it's somewhere up through here. So I'll fill it down, that's about right here. I'll add water, use distilled water. Now you can use hose water in a pinch. That's not recommended because if you use house water, it has chlorine things in it. Those will interact with molecules and rust and things that will cause rust over time. So if possible, use distilled water. Now if you're in a pinch, you got to have regular water, you got a leak or something like that and you got to have it, that'll work. But for this application with a new radiator and stuff in it, then I'm going to put distilled water in it. I'd urge you to do the same. Either which way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour coolant in it till it's about right here, and then I'm going to pour about half that jug in it. And once I do that, I'll be able to take and just pour the rest of that jug into this, and then I'll have it 50-50 mix, or I can mix it a little more. I can pour the antifreeze to here, and then pour half of that water in it, so that way it's more antifreeze than water. But alright, so you got this thing topped off the best you can. Squeeze the hoses a little bit, try to get some of that air out. You only hold so much because the block, some of that drains out whenever you take the cover loose. So here's what we're going to do. The very last thing you do before you get excited inside the stop, standing there, hit the key real quick. You want to make sure it starts. One, anytime you mess with any of the timing components, as the book states, make sure you turn the engine over twice by hand. Now, I would suggest doing this without the belt pulley and stuff on there. If you didn't, then I would urge you to do that by hand now. If you face any kind of resistance, I would take the belt back off, turn it by hand twice, 2 complete rotations. And you want to do that if you feel any kind of resistance, stop, something's wrong. You want to make sure that you do that step. That's critical, critical, critical. Important tips that you should make sure you do. Make sure you have coolant. Make sure you have engine oil. Make sure in the process that any open connectors or anything are connected. That's important. 4th thing, clean all your tools up. Get all your tools, lights, wrenches, all that stuff. Get all that stuff out of the way. You don't want that falling down in your engine bay. Now, don't forget those 4 important steps. So as I always say, fellas, your rig, your call. If I did anything wrong or you guys want to comment on something, let me know below. If not, then I hope I helped some of y'all out as far as doing this project. If there's anything else that I might have missed or need to emphasize on, y'all let me know and I'll see what I can post up. Till then, guys, your rig, your call.